It's KBKW's Coffee Talk. 7:15 is the time, and historian Stephen Arms is our guest. Good morning.
Good morning, Doug.
Now, did you see the president's 60 Minutes interview last night?
No, I didn't.
Didn't. You should Google, or not Google it, go on demand or whatever and see it. It was pretty interesting.
What did he say that particularly got your attention?
Well, he just seems more up on details. But when he first got the job, he seemed to be kind of clueless. And the interview, when she asked the questions, he had an answer. Maybe not the answer that she wanted all the time, but he had an answer, and he seemed to understand more what was happening. And like he said, well, he's been doing this 2 years, and he feels very comfortable. He looked very comfortable. I mean, if they don't find any collusion or whatever they're looking for, he survives that, then I'm sure he'll finish out his term. I don't know what'll happen after that. We'll just have to wait and see. I think a lot of people have a wait and see attitude.
I think that's probably the case, but it is interesting. Like I said, we'll talk about a job that almost no one can be prepared for. I mean, anybody who becomes this one of the issues. Even I've had problems with other presidents, but say for example, Barack Obama came into the office, and when he first took the office, I felt kind of sorry for him also because he'd come from virtually no administrative experience.
Well, he walked into a firestorm with almost the entire economy crashing, world economy crashing.
Well, the economy was doing really poorly at that time, and again, there's a whole Fannie Mae and all that kind of nonsense, and corrupt people spending monies the way they shouldn't on both sides, unfortunately. But I felt sorry because he had to come in and do exactly the same. Talk about on-the-job training, and it's not like your job's that important. Actually, I mean, you're only responsible for the safety of probably the most of the world as president of the United States, in addition to just the United States in general. I mean, so I have great sympathy for people when they first get into that office. I mean, some of them have had, other presidents. Eisenhower had a lot of experience because, of course, being Supreme Commander, making decisions. But a lot of these people have come to the office, and
that's why I like governors better than I do senators or congressmen as presidents, because governors, they actually have a mini country that they're running. Some of the same issues that you have when you're running country outside of defense are very similar.
They are.
And so I think that better prepares people. And what's interesting, you'll see governors that'll go to the Congress or to the Senate.
Yes.
To the House or the Senate. So it kind of goes both directions.
It does. It depends also just on the funny thing about governors is that you have governors, of course, of states. You have, for example, the mayor of, say, New York, he has more resources and people under his control, say, than the governor of Montana.
Sure.
So, I mean, you could make an argument for a governor,
a big city mayor,
having sufficient experience. But then, big city politics are so much different than national politics. I mean, you're not having to worry about what are the French doing and what are the Russians doing, and what are the Saudi Arabians are doing, and whether or not they're killing somebody in the Turkish embassy or whatever, which is a problem, of course, right now. And we assume that
they're going to let him in, but they could have cleaned that thing up. The only thing is, though, if there's a lot of cleaning agents that are still there, bleach and all that sort of stuff, so you don't have the evidence, but you have like a big washdown, so to speak. That's a clue. The cops would take it as a clue.
They would, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if our audience knows about it, but it's an American, he was American, somewhat anti.
I don't think he was an American citizen, but he was living here.
Right, and he worked for American, I can't remember which newspaper he worked for.
I'm trying to remember if it's the New York Times, I'm not sure, but it's one of those big ones.
And he went into the Turkish embassy, and literally his wife was waiting outside.
Or his soon-to-be wife.
And it didn't come out.
No.
And
he could have come out in pieces. They don't know.
And that's what I wondered too. I've heard, but again, a lot of this is in the conjecture range. But it's strange enough that you're talking about. I can understand the United States is going to get involved with this, even though this particular journalist probably isn't very that much pro-American, from what I understand.
Yeah,
but it doesn't. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. I mean, he works.
He's a journalist. That's his job.
And it also in there he does have. I believe his wife is actually American. Is she not?
Could
wife,
be.
We need to. It's a brand new story, folks. In case people are wondering why we're kind of stumbling around.
Well, I think it's been covered, though. I mean, they've been covering the hell out of it the last week.
Yeah, a lot of them have, but there's still all that known is he went into the Turkish embassy and that there are alleged Saudi Arabian
15 of them that showed up,
went into it
and
then left, and he hasn't been seen since. And generally speaking,
and Turkey claims that they actually have audio of what went on, so they must have been bugging the embassy to have that information.
Yeah, wow.
All righty, let's go to our listener line, which is 360-533-5259. Hi, you're on the air.
Hi. You guys are making some comments about professional politicians. I think that's why we elected Donald Trump, wasn't it? We wanted to drain the swamp. Didn't want to...
Yeah, but he brought his own alligators with him.
That's good.
Yeah, I know, but some of them are going to the big house. But overall, I don't think that the country went down the tube in this last 2 years like people anticipated it would. Because he was in there.
Economy is zooming, man.
Yeah.
He's unleashed the power of small business. It's unbelievable how the left does nothing but obstruct. So anyways, that's the reason he got elected, and we didn't want another professional politician there. You have a good day. Bye.
All righty, bye-bye. And it makes a good point because he's not a professional. Well, but he's a politician naturally. I mean, he can't go and get people whipped up the way he does, making political speeches, if he didn't have that knack. I mean, he was better at it than Hillary, and was a match for Bernie. He and Bernie were both, great crowd pleasers.
I think that what Donald Trump is Donald Trump is a salesman. I mean, that's what he is. He's for his living. He knows how to speak to a crowd. He knows how to talk to people, and what he is in a lot of ways he's a master of persuasion. And a lot of people don't understand that about Trump. But if you look at Donald Trump, you realize that he wants to persuade people. There are those he knows he can't, and obviously you're not. Therefore, you just have to deal with him as you would. Unfortunately, that's a good percentage of the media these days. But I do believe he will be more interested in saying what is going to benefit the country or what is benefit for people in the long run than sometimes even the exact truth. People get on, well, he didn't. That's actually not true. And I go, well, it's, it isn't possibly true.
Politicians talk out of both sides of their mouth all the time.
I agreed. Yeah. And which is why I think there's Trump's being held to because Trump is so hated by the left because he wasn't supposed to win. And your last caller, pointed out that I think that the Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton should have been able to win that election. And I know you might have people come and say, oh, well, she got the popular vote and all that. And I can explain the Electoral College to people if they want.
But that's part of the way it works.
But that is the way it works. I mean, had Hillary won the election with the Electoral College, would we still have anybody complaining about the fact about the vote counts? And there have been 5 times, 6 times now in American history that the Electoral College vote and the popular vote have been different, and people are still elected. But I do think that he's somebody who knows how to play to the people. He knows how to talk. And the weird part about it is that he may just actually believe what he says. This is the strange thing I think what people don't want to accept on the fact that I remember an interview with Morgan Freeman was talking about Donald Trump when he was first elected, and he was of the opinion that he hoped for the best with this man because this man is a man who is a vain man, and he is. I mean, he is a vain man. He's been successful at so many things that he's a vain man, and a vain man often doesn't want to fail because it makes him look bad. So maybe he honestly just does want the country to be better.
But in his eyes, in other words, he has a certain vision.
But obviously, he has a vision. When you look at the amount of people that are still massively supportive of him, that his vision may be something that does a large percent of Americans agree with.
Well, he renegotiated NAFTA and changed the name of it, but it's still very similar. The agreement that he made is very similar to the original, but there are some changes. There are
significant changes as far as the benefit for the United States.
But the overall structure is very similar.
Well, again, a car can be redesigned and it still is a car, but the actual details. Yeah,
more parts are going to come from here as opposed to foreign makers and so on and so forth. But they're still going to be making cars in different countries,
right?
Because look at, there's 200,000 workers that work on cars, that build cars in this country of foreign makers,
right?
So I mean, So you see a lot of foreign car companies that are putting our people to work because we know how to build cars.
Right. I agree that, as far as the new trade agreement, with Canada and Mexico is good. I'm curious to see what comes out of. I know they have the basic frameworks of one with the European Union right now,
and the United Kingdom as well.
And the United Kingdom, and of course, because it's trying to Brexit. It should be Brexited by now. It should have exited from the European Union, but that's one of those cases again where the people's will. I think the people of Britain. I mean, they did a popular vote on it in that case, and
it barely got by.
But it's still, if you're
teeny weeny popular vote,
and if people are going to, if you're going to believe in a principle of a democracy, then if the majority says so, they should have let. And I have a bad feeling. I know they're talking about wanting to do another referendum on it, and I have a bad feeling if England does it a second time, one, the people will be outraged by it, and two, it won't be as teeny-weeny of a vote, I would think, anymore.
Don't know. I do know, having lived over in Germany during the days of the common market, the countries, they didn't have the same currency. Right. And I think that going to the euro was not a smart move. And one of the reasons why is because the countries don't have control of their own right. currency. And each country, I mean, if you travel in Europe, every country has its own kind of feel to it,
right?
And people have the different view of how much they work, what they do, what they eat. I mean, it's a whole different thing. It's not like it's similar from going from state to state in a sense, but you're talking about a separate language. But then most Europeans know how to speak 2 or 3 languages anyway.
Well, and the problem I've heard from some people I know who've been, who are opposed to the European Union is that the euro issue is that certain countries who have a baseline economic power, Germany would come to mind, can easily manipulate currency and to the point of, the value of it goes up and down dramatically. I'm of the opinion, I mean, I don't know for a fact, but I wonder where the European Union is going to be there in 10 years. I mean, you're starting to see cracks in it. Mm-hmm. With Great Britain leaving, and if it does actually leave, then that's significant. A conservative government just was elected in Italy. I know there is also problems in Czechoslovakia. Yeah. Some of the Slavic nations are saying Poland's one that isn't happy with it, too, and they'd like to get out. And there's a point, if it starts coming apart, how many members do you...
But the biggest issue they have is the currency. That's why I'm saying if they hadn't changed the currency, it might have been a different story.
The currency is the political issue. Yeah. Well, is the financial issue of it, is what I meant to say. The political issues are a lot that sometimes you find yourself in... The people who are anti-Brexit are arguing that their laws, they're now subject to other people's laws. Their laws are being made by a select group of people, which is the council of that is in charge of the European Union, and you don't have sovereignty anymore.
And you also have immigration. I mean, you think we got immigration issues there? We don't. We're not even close to what they're dealing with in Europe because of the wars and all the people coming over in droves.
I agree.
Hi, you're on the air. You have about 30 seconds. What's your question?
I'll just call back. No biggie.
Oh, okay.
I'm just going to say I just really like Trump. I was a Democrat all my life, and for what he did for the country compared to Obama, I mean, it's unbelievable. He's finally, people coming here illegally and doing just everything he's done. Just the economy, everything. Nobody gives him no credit, I know he's a, smart aleck, but, wish he wouldn't do that.
It's KBKW's Coffee Talk. It's 7:37, and we have Stephen Arms with us, historian, and we're going to be talking about, the Kavanaugh controversy, and now, of course, he's a Supreme Court justice. What was your take on all of that?
Well, I just did a video on it on my YouTube channel.
That's your newest one?
Okay. My newest one, which I, of course, need to plug at this point, which is, Arena of History on YouTube. The problem I had with it was I thought it was a train wreck, the whole Kavanaugh situation. I thought it was horrible the way that they dealt with it. I mean, I was thinking about it myself on this issue of a 35-year-old accusation
From high school?
From high school,
initially,
with alcohol involved, that's being taken as truth. I go, pardon me, but the people, I've heard some...
well, I think he got smashed all the time. There's no doubt in my mind.
Well, but a lot of people in high school probably get... I knew a lot of people. I wasn't one of them because I'm not that I'm a clean as a whistle kind of stuff, but it takes a lot to get me drunk. So getting drunk is too damn expensive for me. When I was in school, I was just
Well, I worked but when I was in the Army, that was a different matter.
Well, yeah, the Army teaches you to be a professional drinker in some cases.
Well, I mean, it turned me into whoa. Yeah, well, what's there's a movie. It's a Neil Simon play that they turned into a movie.
There's a lot of those.
Yeah, and one of them is about these young service guys and all the stuff they get into. I'm trying to remember the name of it. The movie and the play, but that's how it was. I mean, you got some naive kid, into the Army with all these old soldiers and stuff, and you're getting hauled around to all different places, doing all crazy sorts of stuff, and it was like a candy store. Kind of thing.
And smoking's another thing I've noticed. Most people I know who've been former military, at least at some point, have been smokers. Some of them stopped.
Well, I started smoking when I was in the Army.
Right, it seems to be.
Yeah, because back then they pushed it. You got little cigarettes when you're in basic, a little pack of cigarettes, smoke them if you got them, and then you had to field strip the cigarettes, and they had butt patrol where you pick up the butts and stuff. And so pretty soon here I am. I start with Chesterfield, which has no
filters.
Yeah, no filter. You get dizzy and stuff. But pretty soon, I was smoking Marlboro hard packs, and even swapped them with the Russians when I was in East Berlin. They gave us their cigarettes, which were horrible. Wow. And they love those Marlboro hard packs.
No kidding. And if you had Levi jeans, you'd have been a god.
Well, they had people that would come to the barracks and buy our jeans when we were over there. And offer you more money than what you paid for them. So a lot of guys go out and buy jeans and they just keep them in their locker and then untouched, and then sell them to these guys. It would come through probably every 3 or 4 months. They come on post and buy the jeans.
So you're admitting you were dealing in contraband back then?
I guess. Well, I myself never sold my jeans. I just wasn't into that. But I thought it was kind of strange. Okay, let's go to our listener line. Hi, you're on the air.
Hey, can you let your guest talk?
I'll get around to it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, he will. So what's your take on the Kavanaugh thing?
In defense of Doug, it is his show after all.
Well, yeah, and we are talking about something.
Okay, but in Kavanaugh's case, I heard a lot of people on the online who were trying to defend what happened, saying, well, the general presumption is innocent until proven guilty, and they would say, well, that's just a court matter. I go, well, if you're an idiot, then yeah, that's you can state that. But it's the idea of the value of an individual and the voices being equal is Western tradition. It's one of the fundamental ideas of Western civilization. And again, you have an accuser and you have and then you have a denier. Their voices are the same. You cannot just say this person did this and therefore it has to be the case. You can do that, but they call that a witch trial.
But did you find the timing suspect?
I found it extremely suspect in that way. That was the reason I had. And then it goes to corroborating evidence. And the corroborating evidence, I mean, you could have argued, the problem I had with that is that this Lacey Ford lady, the doctor, she said these people would be corroborating evidence, and all of them said, some of them said that isn't, so one said, and so the other said, I don't know what she's talking about. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and again, the problem with it is that,
and she was very vague about things.
And she was very vague. And I was using the analogy. My son was born about the same time. He's at the time, and I was going in my memory trying to remember the details of his birth, just as a memory test for myself. And I remember many things about it, but I can't tell you a lot of the individual details of it. And I wasn't drunk at the time. I mean, obviously, I don't. The person who accused Kavanaugh. I think the problem with Kavanaugh, I think Kavanaugh's kind of a Boy Scout. I do. I think he drunk when he was in high school and in college, and then he got his. A lot of people when they go to college, men especially, they minor in girls and they major in alcohol in the beginning, and he got past that and had to get to work. And I think since then he seems like, because I looked at his history.
You can't go around doing that stuff as a judge.
I looked at his history when they first nominated, because I didn't know who he was. either. And I started going over and go, he seems to be, he's a more of a strict constitutionalist, which is, I think personally, is a good thing as far as dealing with judges, because I don't think I've got a piece coming out also in the next Senior Sunset Times, which I get to plug something else I just wrote. I finished up and turned in yesterday. That has to do with the history of the Supreme Court, and and how it works and the structure of the court, and over time. And I talked about some of the controversies, like
FDR when he was trying to
the court packing was the last thing I talked about. Similar situation when Andrew Johnson was president, that you actually went the other way. They actually cut the number of justices so Johnson couldn't make an appointment.
Oh, really?
Congress did.
Oh, some nasty moves there.
Yeah, the other way around.
But the other side of that is when the Republicans kept the Democrats from putting their guy in for the whole year. See, so it's tit for tat. Really.
It was about 8 months. But that one was an interesting one. I personally wouldn't have done that. You're talking about Merrick Garland.
Yes.
I would have said let him come forward and vote him down. I mean, that's what they could have done. They could have let him come forward, and the Republicans could have voted as a block and just voted him down. And then, the Democrats wouldn't have liked it then, but at least it would have been, I think it personally would have been fair. But the principle that's being done is one that was, again, Joe Biden was the one who put this forth originally, because during when George Bush was president, that he should not appoint it in the end of his term. And there has been, it's one of those weird things. It's like we have 2 terms for presidents because they altered the Constitution after FDR died. Before that, presidents only served for 2 terms because Washington only served for 2 terms, and it was a tradition. And traditionally in the past, if a president is in the last year of their presidency, they do not appoint Supreme Court justices. It's been a tradition. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a law. So you could argue from the Republican side, we were just going with the tradition of things that have been done in the past, and I personally think, like I said, I would have said, put him out there, vote him down, if you don't want him to be a judge. But I do think that again, traditions are wonderful things when you're on the winning side, and they become immediate obstacles and horrible things when you're on the losing side. I thought there was a little bit of hypocrisy in it. In the Democrats screaming about it when it's a policy they followed in the past, when it was to their advantage. And I'm not saying I was talking to my wife recently about that. I never underestimate the Republican Party's ability to be stupid. They can do it incredibly. They can lose worse than any party I've ever seen and be on top. But I'm at the point now when I look at the left is actually I'm getting frightened of the left. When I see the level of venomousness and the level of hatred that people are doing, you see these protests with people, that are, screaming in people's faces and attacking people. The Republican...
It's like the 60s.
It is, but again, we haven't had it since the 1960s.
It was more violent then. You had people shooting presidents or people running for president.
And only the only
Martin Luther King.
I was going to say, but I've heard that actually said a number of times by people of some prominence that maybe the assassination of a politician is a good idea. Johnny Depp got in a little trouble for that, for example.
Oh yeah, well he's a little out there right now. Let's go to our listener line. Hi, you're on the air.
Morning, Gary here.
Hey, Gary.
So I don't recall anyone on the left driving a car into a group of people who were demonstrating, as happened in Charlotte. You recall any of that?
Has anyone who's ever been a Democrat killed anybody for political reasons?
Not talking about a Democrat. You said the left is becoming violent. Well, I don't recall any leftists driving a car into a group of people who are demonstrating and killing someone.
I agree with that, but you're also the person you're dealing with. You could argue he's a conservative. All right, he's also insane. This person was criminally insane.
Really? He hasn't even had a trial yet.
Everything I've read on this gentleman, he had serious issues.
Now you sound like Donald Trump. There's good on both sides.
Well, in any circumstances, if you have 1,000 people at a protest, even if you have Antifa on one side and the Klan on the other, there are going to be. You can't tell me that all of those people are evil human beings. There has to be a few good ones in there somewhere.
Really, some good Nazis. Well, I
how
don't
about
know.
how about some good Antifas? Antifas are anti-fascists that are actually acting like Nazis. They're much closer to the brown shirts than they want to be. So, or at least they allege to be.
Sir, I don't recall any Antifas getting behind the wheel of a car and driving into a crowd.
Okay, agreed. But you do remember what exactly was the political backings of Sirhan Sirhan?
Then let's drop this business about the left is turning violent. I don't.
Well, I'm not going to drop the. I'm not going to drop the person just because you don't like having to hear about it.
I don't recall anyone on the left at their campaign rallies, as Donald Trump did, talking about beating people up, that he'll pay the legal bills when they do it. Things used to be done a different way. Sock them, lock her up. I don't recall those things happening on the left.
Well, maybe you need to adjust your memory a little better. The problem with it is that you're I think it's always fascinating when a person wants to. You're making the straw man argument. I'll find Trump said something bad, therefore this is the way it is.
No, I'm not creating a straw man.
Yes,
I'm
you
giving
are,
you
because
examples of what Trump is doing, and his followers, his acolytes.
And how many Republicans have harassed people out of restaurants? How many Republicans have assaulted people? The Tea Party used to have rallies, and people used to scream and yell and look for violence. Was there any violence at those rallies? And the answer is no, there wasn't. So I mean, that's a ridiculous argument. You're sitting there trying to tell me that if you don't think that the level of viciousness that is happening on the left currently is a problem, then obviously you're not going to see it because you're obviously letting your personal prejudice cloud your vision. There are people doing many violent things in this country on the left.
Example, please.
There was just recently a raid in against the Republican headquarters in New York City. The place was vandalized and parts of it destroyed.
You better look that story up because it was right wingers who were doing it.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. That is nonsense.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, I have a question for you two because now this is Gary Morrell you're talking with.
I don't know the man, but
he's a professor, historian, and a professor and an author. Would you guys like to meet face to face on the air here?
I don't have a problem doing that.
Sure.
Okay, Gary, we'll get that set up.
Okay.
And I'll be in touch with both of you. We'll figure something out where you both can be in the same room, and I'll wear a Seahawk helmet.
No, well, Doug, I've been in the same room with other right-wingers before, and you've never had to put on a helmet.
I know, I'm joking.
Except you've had to put on your tinfoil helmet.
Okay, so we got it set up then.
Oh, you can do that. I have no problem with that. We've talked about that in the past.
Okay, well, we'll get. I got to take.
Vote Kim Foster for Grace Harbor County Clerk.
Paid for by friends to elect Kim Foster for Grace Harbor County Clerk.
It's KBKW's Coffee Talk. It is 7:52. Let's go to our listener line. Hi, you're on the air.
Good morning, and thanks for stirring my blood.
Hi, Dave.
Hi. It's obvious that Gary Morrell has to listen to anything that Maxine Waters has to say. And with that being said, I'm going to put my tinfoil hat back in the cupboard. I put it on every time Gary's on the air.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to point that out. So thank you.
You bet. Bye-bye.
And the caller's making an issue about is a lack of civility, and in that you have extreme circumstances. But Maxine Waters is calling for people to do things like confront people and get in their
when
faces.
they're trying to eat at restaurants and stuff like that.
And that is it. And you can make an argument that could be a call to violence because there are people who do end up doing violent things because of that.
And it disrupts. I mean, people are in a restaurant to eat, not listen to some politician.
Exactly, but that is still just words. I mean, when you're looking at when you look at property destructions and things that have happened because of if you're not willing to, Antifa is on the list is considered under investigation by NSA as a United States terrorist organization. I mean, I don't have to make this up. They are considered a terrorist group within the United States for the purposes of investigation and observation. If that's the case, then there's no. This is just like the Klan used to be.
Well, we have another listener. Hi, you're on the air.
Good morning. Hey, I have no problem with the left being more confrontive. I think they should have been a long time ago, and it's about time that it used to be that the most obscure thing or the most elusive thing in Washington was a Democrat with a backbone, and so I'm thrilled that they're standing up. But what happens is that you get the faux news, pretend news. They'll play half of Eric Holder's quote where he said, "When they go low, we kick them." And he said right after that, immediately after that, he said, "Now I'm not talking about anything violent or inappropriate. I'm talking about being tough." And
well, isn't kicking kind of a violent action?
He didn't, and he said, "I'm not talking about anything physical or inappropriate. I'm talking about being tough and not putting up with what they want to try to do." So I don't. And they never play the very very part right immediately after his quote about kick him. They never play that part because it doesn't fit their meme. And confronting somebody in a restaurant, oh my goodness, how violent is that? Jiminy Christmas. Calling out some of these right-wing nut bars and for the extreme politics, trying to suppress the vote of black people and people of color and minorities.
Doesn't do much for people that are trying to eat when you got Democrats coming in raising hell. That's not a good way to get people to vote for you.
I think that it's great to confront the people for what they're doing. And when people like Ted Cruz or others are trying to distort America and change America for the worse, and stuff, I think.
In your opinion,
of course, it's my opinion. Why the hell would I give yours?
But the point is that it wasn't. But the problem is you're making an entire judgment call on individuals, and I doubt very seriously you know very much about what Ted Cruz has actually put forth or whoever. Nope. It doesn't matter. There's no level of communication. There's no level of communication if you're just screaming in someone's face. If you really want to oppose somebody, oppose them at the voter booth.
Well, we're doing that.
Yeah, and what are you going to do if the Democrats don't gain seats this time? What if they don't? What are you going to do? More violence?
Then they're going to continue. There is no violence. We're not being violent.
Tell that to the fires that have happened in several universities. Tell about the property damages that have happened when speakers come into areas. I mean, even the Charlottesville situation. Everyone wants to point out. But and because you had a confrontation between extreme right wingers and extreme left wingers, and they got together and started fighting. Of the 1,000 people there, I bet you only 10% of them were actually the people who were the extreme ones. The rest of them were there on the issues.
Okay, I'm going to take another call because I got more calls coming in. But thanks for yours. Let's go to our next caller. Okay, call back. All right.
Unfortunately, but like I said, in that circumstance, I don't. That you had. Well, there they are.
Yeah, here we go. Let's go to him. Hi, you're on the air.
Hey, so a comment you made earlier, probably at the beginning of the show, was how Hillary could have beat Trump in the election. And I wanted to confirm that. She could have. You're absolutely right. But Trump supporters should be kissing the butt of Hillary and Bernie supporters and the Democratic Party because of what the Democrats did to Bernie at the convention. That's the reason Trump's lucky butt won. If you look at that popular vote, Hillary brought all of that popular vote but the Bernie supporters. They weren't going to vote for her. It was a protest vote. Or sit down. I still know some of them today that feel justified in that. You've probably talked to one of their supporters this morning. I haven't been listening, but that in and of itself doesn't mean he's the best president. And here, for the other fact is, a third of the voting age population didn't vote for either of those. So it's a failure on both parties. So anyway, have a good day, sir.
All right, bye-bye. Yeah, he makes a good point. I mean,
he does, but from a looking at it demographically, the argument would be where would those voters have come from? It might be the case in the places where Trump won by very small margins, like Pennsylvania, that if enough Bernie voters had come out and voted for Hillary, she might have taken that state. But for example, if it's over half, I mean, obviously Washington's a classic example. If the Bernie voters didn't vote for Hillary in Washington, who cares? She still got 60% of the vote. Once you're over half, and you're giving 100% of the electoral votes to that candidate, then you can get 100% of the vote in Washington, which for the Democrats or for the Republicans, though that's pure fantasy. But and people would, and it's still only going to be the same amount of votes. So I'm not so sure the Bernie voters would have worked in that case.
We have about 30 seconds. What's your question?
Oh, quick comment. It's going to be interesting when you have them two professors in the same room, Doug. The one thing you might want to do when you do is compare their hand sizes. Thank you, Doug.
All righty, bye-bye.
Evelyn in the newsroom.
It's KBKW's Coffee Talk. It is 8:10, and coming up perhaps this hour, we may or may not be talking to a candidate running for sheriff in Pacific County, and it's just basically due to schedules. But we do have Stephen Arms. He's going to hang out with us for the next 20 minutes.
Okay.
And so, because we were going to talk about Kavanaugh and stuff, a lot of calls came in, and we don't care.
Kavanaugh calls are good. Discussion is essence. If you discuss on matters, you put forth ideas. It's when you start screaming at each other is when you don't listen. Is you're never going to accomplish anything with that. I think the as far as the end result on the Kavanaugh issue is that I think it would be that he is now the Justice Supreme Court, and the court has now made a shift in a more quote-unquote conservative way, and that's just the court has gone back and forth over the years.
Well, and how many times have we heard that a Supreme Court justice did not vote the way that they thought they would because it was either more to the left or more to the right than what was anticipated?
You have it in the past more. There's some shifts depending on the time frames you're talking about, but in modern times, justices tend to side. You will rarely you occasionally will get a justice who is kind of can go either way, but they tend to either be. I mean, the argument most people have on it, and I'm not sure this is fair, but it's the argument people use is: are you believing that the judicial branch should be legislating, or that it should just be interpreting the law? Conservative justice should only be interpreting the law. In the Supreme Court's case, the constitutionality of an issue. But you do get people. Again, this was shown in the vote dealing with Obamacare, because there literally were considerations of altering of the text of the law. The court should not be doing that, and that was obviously a mistake. So that would have been a political decision. But if you make anyway. But but Kavanaugh's on the court. But anyway,
well, let's go to our listener line. Hi, you're on the air.
Good morning.
Hi.
I hope, Doug, that it's a 2-hour program instead of an hour, if you're going to have them both on.
You mean when we have Gary? Well, an hour will be enough for the first time out.
You think so? Okay,
yeah.
I'm wondering, did you guys see Hillary's interview where she was saying civility will return to the country when the Democrats take over the House and the Senate? And then she also they talked to her about the Me Too movement, and it was okay with her for people, males to step down over sexual harassment. And she was asked about whether she thought her husband should have left office, and she said, "Oh no." So I'm hoping that you saw those and can comment on those.
I actually did see the interview she's talking about. You're paraphrasing.
I saw clips of it.
Yeah, you're paraphrasing it a little bit, but you're in essence you are accurate that you can't be civil with a party. And again, I'm going to paraphrase her because I don't think I can quote her directly. That you can't be civil with a party who's trying to destroy everything that you stand for, which is a strange kind of twist in the idea that your people should be opposed to ideas, but destroy indicates that you don't want any of them at all. And obviously, that's not the case.
Right there? Okay.
Yeah. So thank you.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, and as far as the Me Too movement, that's one of those circumstances where with Hillary Clinton, she needs to be extremely careful because, it reminds me that there's a classic scene from Casablanca where Claude Rains' character, Louis, is... I'm closing down the casino. I'm shocked to find that there's gambling here, and the gentleman walks up and goes, "Here's your winnings, sir." That's kind of the Hillary Clinton. I'm in favor of men stepping down if they're accused by women of any sort of sexual harassment,
but not her husband.
But not her husband.
That was accused when he was a governor.
And in his cases, I mean, obviously there were civil suits and things passed. Yeah. I mean, Bill Clinton lost his ability to practice law in Arkansas because of these circumstances. So I mean, obviously, I think actually it's a probably shock some people. But I think actually Bill Clinton was actually a fairly decent president as far as a president. I think as a human being, he's a horn dog. But as what he did in office, and he and Newt Gingrich worked together, and the last time we had a balanced budget was during that time. There's a lot of things in the Clinton presidency that I think are good. But
I had what did me in was when he was on the air and he says, I did not have sex with that woman. Give me a break. Okay. So you think we're dumb enough to listen to this after what you just did? Fess up to it, get it over with. But no, when he said that, I thought, okay, fine. I voted for him twice.
Well, it's a weird situation. I mean,
I didn't want him in the White House again because that's what would happen.
Well, you lock up your daughters. Bill Clinton's in town, but and he had the same sort of issue. Richard Nixon, in a lot of ways, is the same way. Good president, bad human being. Because Nixon,
but he wasn't a womanizer, though.
No. But he obviously did have problems. He had to step down because of Watergate. I think in Clinton's case is exactly Nixon. If Nixon had looked at the American people and said, members of the committee to elect the president broke the Democratic headquarters, and I completely stand against that, and I'm going to have them, dealt with and prosecuted by the Justice Department appropriately. And if the American people think I should step down, then I'll have to follow the will of the people. He'd have finished his term.
No, he won by a landslide.
Well, he did. He's 60%, which is about all any president ever manages to do. But if Bill Clinton, I think, is the same way. If Bill Clinton had just fessed up and said, yes, I've done it, but it's none of your damn business. It's between me and my wife, and the rest of you can stick it. I think the same sort of thing. American people are very forgiving, as long as they know what they're dealing with. I think when you insult their intelligence, most people, people have a logical interface in their mind, and they also have a BS meter, which is basically the same thing. And I think that most people don't like being lied to in that way. So let's see. What else is going on in the news, though? Kanye West?
Yeah, Kanye West. I saw. What was really funny though is they were talking about. Well, they were using 4-letter words in the White House, and I'm thinking, okay, let's see. Lyndon Johnson, Nixon, Truman. They were all noted for
having pretty foul mouths.
Yeah. And so, but it was the first time that was in public. So that was probably ratcheted it up there because Kanye's kind of out there in his own little world.
It's funny. I don't really until recently. Because I'm not a big fanboy person about anything, but I really didn't know that much about Kanye West. But he's been coming up in the news, so I started doing the read on. He apparently is brilliant. I mean, he's very, very successful.
Well, he's successful, but his music I can't figure out either.
Well, music's is almost totally subjective, but he's successful at it. I mean, he does seem to be a bit of an entrepreneur, and I think so I didn't really know that much about him in the past. I do think he's getting very unfairly treated by the members of the black community and also by the media. I mean, when he said that George Bush doesn't care about doesn't care about black people after Katrina, he was heralded as a hero. He comes along and says, and he's apparently known Donald Trump for quite some time.
Yeah, they've been buddies for years.
And he comes out and say, I'm in favor of this guy. I know this guy. And then all of a sudden he's insane. Now he's unstable. I mean, that's just.
But he says some pretty strange things. Like putting him in a hydrogen plane. I think Microsoft was working on or whatever.
Well, I know, but the idea of just I think the thing about him, I had to every time I actually listened to that interview and I stopped and listened to it and thought about what he was said, and what he's talking about. The idea is you don't need to have hydrofuels. You can actually use hydrogen as a power source, particularly if you have fusion power. What he's doing is he's making a jump in his mind that he sees, obviously, and I was able to see it once I listened to what he said. He wants to slow him down enough to say, "What did he just say?" Okay, because he's one of those people that he almost patters. He comes off so fast.
And the 4-letter words flying around and stuff.
Yeah, and it does make it difficult sometimes to keep track of him. But everything that he was critiqued for, when I actually stopped and listened to it and said, "What is he talking about?" and did a little checking on what he'd said in the past, I went, "Oh, okay. You're just not." You're not in the same room as him. He's talking about something else. He seems to actually be very intelligent if, like most artists, very erratic. And so in that case, but I do think that what's interesting about Kanye West, and I think in generally dealing with Black Americans in general, is what we were talking about at one point earlier, that Trump, when he initially took office, his popularity with African Americans, I believe, was 16%. Wasn't it originally?
Yeah, and he doubled it.
Yeah, and it's
almost doubled it.
Well, he's over doubled it because that's when I heard it was 38%. So that was
last night I heard 27.
No. Well, I think it depends on your polls.
No, and it was during the interview and I think he said that it was during the interview that you did on 60 Minutes.
They said it's 27.
I believe so.
Then it's probably because I'd agree with it then. But the whole point of that is that I could understand why people who are opposed to Trump would find that alarming because again, Black Americans vote at a rate of about 94% toward the Democratic Party. If you're suddenly pulling out 5% of the vote, that becomes hard. That now becomes a margin. Again, if you're talking about a place where it's a 51-50 or a 50 and a half to 49 and a half, and all. If you have black vote shifting in those areas, I could understand why Democrats would be alarmed about it.
In the polls, also, Trump does very well with women in the rural areas, outside of the city, and that are homemakers, and that some work outside the family and things like that. But there's a big chunk of women that support him, and then there's in the metropolitan areas,
right?
It's over to the Democrats.
Oh, it is. Well, that's a general statement,
right?
That if you look at large. I mean, Washington doesn't know about that. Seattle's not known for being a liberal area, right? No. Yeah, but I mean, and Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York. You look at those cities, and they are all, run by Democratic factions, and they're pretty much Democratic cities. Which is again the argument we're talking about. With elections on electoral colleges, is that your metropolitan areas may. For example, I know there are people in Washington that are concerned about the fact that you have that Seattle's deciding policy rather.
It's KBKW's Coffee Talk. It's 8:23, and now let's go to our listener line. Hi, you're on the air.
Hey, Doug.
Hi, you're on the air.
How are you doing today? Hey, good interview, and this is Aragon calling. I just have a prediction coming up this November. I don't think there's going to be any blue wave. I think the Kavanaugh issue has really backfired on the Democrats. Recently I've seen polls where Dino Rossi has jumped up upwards of about 10 points ahead of his opponent.
Yeah.
And I think that the blue wave is not going to happen, which is going to precipitate mass hysteria on the Democratic side, and the kind of chaos and Antifa-type violence is going to intensify as they see more and more power slipping from their fingers.
This could be real interesting.
It is going to be interesting. Historically, people say, well, in off-year elections, the party in power loses seats. Well, that is true 3/4 of the time, but which means 1/4 of the time it isn't true. And we'll have to see whether it is a way. I do agree with you that I do see a level of fear of loss of power. And again, the argument of Kavanaugh being a justice, shifting the court now as a 5-4 decision. And and leaning toward more what would be conservative or constitutionalist, depending on how you want to define that, justices. But I do think that you have to. I agree that if people are going to have to be really careful, and I mean, you really have to put laws out and deal with it, because you just cannot have people rioting in the streets. You can have mobs attacking people. I mean, we had that in the '60s, and sometimes. I mean, I saw Watts riots in my life. I've seen things that sometimes, the National Guard gets involved.
Well, look at May Day celebrations in Seattle.
Oh, I know. And it's ridiculous, and even, the people, the Constitution gives us the right to peaceably assemble, but the key phrase in that word is peaceably. And if you're blocking streets and impeding other people's rights, if you're causing other people to feel threatened or other people to feel, it's not free speech anymore, folks. At that point, your right to assemble is limiting my right to assemble somewhere else. And at that point, go ahead.
I think the Republican Party has something going for them. Number one, we usually turn out in off-year elections. I think that just goes in our favor. Number two, I think Trump is governing far better than what anybody, even Republicans, anticipated. I mean, you just look at the economy, you look at where we are as a nation compared to under the Obama era, and I think Trump has surprised everybody. And thirdly, I think that the message of the Democratic Party is, we hate Trump, we hate Trump, we hate him. We hate him, and that's it. And they haven't given anybody something to believe in. Those people in the middle who are undecided, they're not these or ours. I just don't think they're wooed by this message of hate and hysteria that the left, which is mainly the Democratic Party. I don't know if there's any moderate Democrats left in the party, but I just think that message of hysteria and hatred is not going to woo over the people in the middle, which actually decide the elections.
I do agree with you. He's talking what you're talking about, John. They call the independents.
Yeah, I'm an independent. I
actually technically fall in that category too, despite the branding that Gary tried to put on me. I don't think of myself as a right winger. I am socially very liberal on a lot of issues, but I like practical solutions to things. I don't look at a problem. I want to know how you get to solving a problem, not on, okay, we need to solve the problem. Well, that's fine. That's a given. So, I mean, I don't believe one way or another, but I do agree with your caller's here statements that I don't think fear and hate is a political platform unless you're running as the National Socialist Party.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks, guys. A good interview and good to talk to you this morning.
All right, take it easy, Aragon.
Thank you for calling.
Bye-bye. It's 8:27, and we're just about to wrap things up. Anything else that you can think of?
Well, let's see. Yeah, like I said, like I said, this election is going to be fascinating from a historical point of view. I mean, I always look at things kind of sometimes with the dispassionateness of a historian, trying to see where it's going. I don't know what's going to happen if the Republicans either keep the House and Senate, or even worse, what if they gain seats? Which also happens in those off-election years when they don't lose seats.
The poll I saw the other day was it said that they think that the Republicans will keep the House but lose the Senate.
And I've seen ones that go the other direction too. The reverse. So I mean, and of course those might be. Make sure they're not the same polls that said Hillary Clinton was going to win by 90% of the vote. Yeah. So you do have to. I'm a little bit on polling. I kind of roll my eyes and say, I'm getting to the point. I think the American people are tired of polls, and I don't think they. I think when pollsters call them, I don't think they tell them the truth anymore.
Or even take a call.
Yeah.
They just say, "Oh, it's a poll," and they hang up.
Yeah, and I would agree. I'm not sure I would enjoy taking the polls from people either.
And by the way, we've tentatively, because I got to clear this with Gary, but I've set up a date of November the 13th, which is a Tuesday, for you and Gary Morrell to meet on the air here. Okay. And I got to clear it with him, but that works for you.
That works for me. Yeah, I'll be happy to do it.
Okay.
It should be a fascinating discussion.
All right, so that's what we're going to do, and I'll contact Gary to make sure that he's available for that. And then once we got it down, we're looking forward to it.
Okay.
The Clash of the Titans.
Such as we are.
If you wish to join the quest for knowledge, the battle for truth, please hit the like button, recommend my channel to others, and of course, subscribe. Thank you kindly.